where do you want to start with your testimony? We got all the time in the world here, brother.
All right. I guess it's always best to start in the beginning.
Sure.
Me being a pastor was probably the last thing that myself or anybody that knew me ever thought would happen. In fact, I grew up the son of a prostitute. My mother was a prostitute. My father was her pimp, and that's how I was conceived. Now, my grandmother was, I believe, the one that was sowing the seed of prayer, amen, over my life, all of the years that I was away with my mother. And so I grew up in a very unnatural sense. If I talk to other people who come from a two-parent background and all of that, the most important woman in my life at a young age was teaching me, not to love. You don't do that. Everything that most people grow up learning that you're supposed to do, I was learning not to do because that would come back to bite you, things like that. I grew up all my life around drug dealers.
Where was this?
This was in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I grew up all my life around drug dealers, murderers, and my father, he was actually considered the pimp of the year for 3 years in a row.
Who gives that award? Are you serious?
I promise you, people see it on TV as a movie and they think that it was a game, but in actuality, they would have these hustlers would get together in various parts of the world, and they would have it this place this year, this place that year, and my dad he won it 3 years in a row. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's the kind of environment you're growing up in. So go ahead.
Yes, sir. 7 years old, I witnessed my first murder, and I understood what it was. And in fact, I was actually the lookout while the body was stored until later that night people would come back and get it. So this is what this is what I grew up around all my life. Yeah.
In Louisville, Kentucky. So your mother was a prostitute.
Yes, sir.
Your dad was a drug dealer.
Yes, sir.
And a pimp.
And
Both?
a pimp. Yes, sir.
When did you recognize that you're living in something that's dysfunctional? I mean, if that's your norm, that's not dysfunctional to you. Yeah. But at the same time, you were observing things that probably caused you trauma, right?
Yes, sir. I, with my mom being a prostitute, a lot of times she did her business in the home, and we had a house where there was no bedroom doors. And so, you're getting up, you're a kid, you're getting up to use the restroom. There was no telling what you would see. There was no telling what you would hear.
You're kidding.
Not at all.
You're a child, and you're watching your mother engage in these activities that...
Yeah, you'd run up on it, go into the restroom or whatever.
Oh, my word.
And so that was...
What did you think? Did you think...
You know what? I didn't think much of it at all.
Right.
It would hurt me because I would see my mother in this act as you would anyone. But, I didn't understand how much it had affected me until later on in years, the way that I would dominate women, the way that I would, come across a woman that I had no ability to love, to feel whatsoever. And it wasn't until I started going, having prison stints that I would sit back and rethink my life and realize how messed up I was and why I was so messed up. The problem I think that really bothered me the most, even as an adult, was that nobody would nobody would say, hey, my bad. We did this to you. Everybody had, up until recently, my mother and my father, I think that they justified why it was that I was grown up the way I was, that I was brought up the way I was. Here's the deal. It's conflicting to a point. Most of the time I'm with my mother. I'm never really around my father. That was a relationship within itself, just not being around him. But when he would show up, he'd show up with the Cadillac with the suicide doors, 6 women in the car, and he'd tell the women, hey, take him to the store. And they had to call me sir at 6, 7 years old. They had to, I couldn't hold my candy because, pimps don't do that. She's our slave. She does whatever we tell her to do. It was conflicting because I had the rest of my family, the rest of my uncles and aunts, they were all productive people in society. And so I would go spend the weekends with them sometimes, and their life was so different. It was so calm. It was so loving and caring. And I had made up in my mind young that I wanted to be a lawyer and a prosecutor, actually, because I wanted to have my dad, put away. And not just him. I wanted to have my mother put away too. You know what I'm saying? And so.
And how old were you when this was your dream?
Like 10, man.
All right.
Like 9,
so
10.
this is the extraordinary thing. You're talking about a kid growing up who is supposed to, in the way God intends, supposed to bond with his parents.
Yeah.
but in your mind, there's this seething, this anger because you want to punish your parents. That's got to be something that kind of tears you apart too, because you want
you
to
want
love them,
okay.
and you want them to love you, and you want it to be normal according to what you see at your relative's house, but instead there's this anger underneath as well.
Well, and anger, simply because a lot of people that would get hurt, a lot of people that would get dealt with in my life were people that I liked. But if they had offended, like say my mom and her boyfriend, whoever he might be at that time, if they had offended them, then, there's no telling what would go on. And so, you see this woman get beat up in the backyard that used to babysit you, and so you would have this thing like, y'all got to be stopped. The problem is that as I got older, I was more, how can you say it? I was more defined by who I came from than by who I really was and wanted to be. So now instead of having some people that, besides my grandmother, besides having people that was going to have my back in the situation, I began to take on who they were making me to be. I began to form into this monster myself.
Talking to Pastor Stephen Lyons from Lexington, Kentucky. He's in studio with us today. He's driven down to be with us with our good friend Mitchell Toll. Stephen is the pastor of Kingdom Life Ministries in Lexington, KY.
No, I'm the pastor of Growth Temple Ministries.
I just made you pastor of Kingdom Life Ministries. So
would you like to be?
You can be both.
Not at
so
all.
We'll put you down for both. Oh, I'm sorry. What is your church again?
Growth Temple Ministries.
Growth Temple Ministries. Okay, so you're 7 years old and living in Louisville. Your mom's a prostitute. Your dad's a pimp. And you're seeing all these things that no child should have to witness and experience. Move us, and you've expressed your feelings, which were very natural. You anger and, and then when you get to go see Normal with your cousins and your other family, you compare your life to what they're living in, and you see that, hey, I'm in a bad way here. But move on up here. Did you get were you going to school? Did you get into any trouble? What happened, let's say, from 7 to 15, those years?
The weird thing about it is, as a juvenile, I never got in any trouble at all. Even in school, other than being, I didn't do real well in school as far as grades went. It was just too much on the plate for that. But I didn't experience trouble. Now, around 16 is when I began to realize that there was something else that I wanted. I wasn't going to be poor. I wasn't going to continue to be how I grew up. But from 7 to 15, it was more so just I'm understanding who I'm becoming, and I can't become that until a certain age. And so even though, you're telling me, you better not ever sell drugs, you better not ever do drugs, you better not ever drink, you better not, this is all I'm seeing. And so I'm just kind of laying in the cut. I'm really by myself through those years, just trying to, come into my own existence. But at 16 years old, I woke up to getting ready. My birthday, my 16-year-old birthday gift was my mother standing over my head with a dumbbell, about ready to slam it down on me and to this day, I don't know why. And her boyfriend at the time ran in the room and stopped her. And that was my 16-year-old birthday gift. And it was at that time that I began to lightweight smoke weed and drink, begin to hang out a little bit later than what I wanted to, because I was a nerd, to be in all honesty. With everything that I grew up around, it was crazy because I was a nerd. I liked to read books. I liked to chill. It wasn't for a lot of drama and chaos and all of that. I guess that might have been because of what I saw so young. But I also understand I didn't want that issue because I knew what was inside of me. I knew what I was capable of if things would ever get crazy in my life. And so I was a nerd. But about
You're a big guy, though. You didn't play sports.
Wasn't always this big. A lot of people see me now and they go, yeah, a lot of this has to do with prison living in actuality.
Okay. As a kid, you weren't that big. Okay.
So what you mentioned your grandmother. Was there any Christian influence in your life? You mentioned other aunts and uncles and your grandmother. Was there any Christian influence in your childhood?
Yeah, my grandmother, she was, church every Sunday, Bible study, anything that was going on in the church, she'd pretty much try to have me there.
Did she know what you were living in?
Yeah. Well, no, you know what? She knew, but I don't think she knew to that extent. I think she thought that she had a wild child, and that was pretty much it. But as she got older, me and her, she was my best friend in the world while she was here. We began to talk. She was the one person that knew everything about me, and and understood why, and so. But as far as other influences, I had aunts. I had one aunt that I called Claire Huxtable. She was the most beautiful lady in the world. Always in church. We had, if you did good through the week, you'd have stars on the calendar, and you get so much money for that, and stuff like that. I mean, so I knew right. I knew what it looked like. I knew what it felt like. But when I went back home, and I don't want to, because I love my mother dearly, I want to get that clear. Awesome lady. She bounced back to be awesome, and a very big part of my life. When as far as a preacher goes, she was the one that was real enough to call me out one day and just say, "Look here, you made some vows while you were locked up." She said, I'll never forget this. She said, I have all this cocaine, I have all of these drugs, and I'm making any money. I don't know what's going on. I do this well. And she said, when you were in prison, she said, and she started crying in the car. She said, this is the first time I'm going to be a mother to you, and I'm going to tell you something. She said, you made a vow to God. She's like, you made a vow while you were in prison that if he freed you, you would do this. And you came back out and you done something else. It's never going to work for you. And that was monumental, as well as my father. Yes, sir.
Pastor Stephen Lyons with us. Let me ask you this. You're talking about your mother today, more recently, and how, but you're talking about you went to prison?
Yes, sir.
What age were you, and what did you get in trouble for?
Let's see, drug trafficking. The first time I went to prison, I believe I was 20 years old. I had caught my first case when I was about 19. Actually, I was about 21 when I first went to prison. I caught my first case when I was 19.
What does that mean? Caught your first case?
I got busted for the first time. And, it was crazy because I was we just being real today, right? I was just actually in a place to buy some weed to smoke. I wasn't some marijuana to smoke. I wasn't there hustling. I wasn't doing anything. I think I was sharing this with Pastor Toll on the way up here yesterday, that I was actually it was the one time probably in my life that I got caught up in some stuff that I really had nothing to do with. And it was my first taste. And they gave me 6 months in a county jail and 2 years probation. And I thought to myself, I have over $50,000 in a drawer in a house somewhere, and you're going to give me 6 months and 2 years probation. I think I can do this. I think I'll be okay. And that was a setup for me. And it's something that I think about with the system today, that they slapped me so lightly that it put no fear into me whatsoever. In fact, it if anything, it made me feel bigger than I had before. It made me feel like I couldn't be stopped.
Where'd you have the $50,000 from? Was it just from selling drugs?
Yeah, just selling drugs, yeah. Okay. At that time, I didn't smoke. I didn't get high. I didn't, all of my, at 16 when I had started just dealing with drugs, like smoking a little weed here, drinking here, all that was over. And I knew that there was a business part of this, and that's what I wanted to be. So I had pretty much a clean system, and so it was more easy for me to make money than it was for more other drug dealers out there that was getting high and stuff like that. So,
so you're still living in Louisville this whole time?
No, this time actually, it's funny. Louisville is much worse than Lexington, but I didn't start getting in trouble till we got to Lexington.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you went to prison at what age?
21.
21 for selling drugs?
Yes, sir.
And your conviction, and so how long were you there?
I was there 2 years that time.
Okay. And
this is a state
penitentiary. Yes, sir.
Okay. So what happened to you? When along the way here did you meet the Lord?
That's very interesting. I was actually a Muslim for like 16, 17 years.
What?
Yeah, a Muslim.
16, 17 years.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Oh, yeah, so that's kind of a curveball. You have this Christian influence in your life.
Yeah.
How did that happen? How'd you become a Muslim?
In prison, probably.
Actually, no. I was actually a Muslim before I ever got locked up, and I think that's very important for people to know. Simply because we're stereotyped that when we go to prison, then we become Muslim, and that wasn't the situation. I actually, hanging on the blocks, most of the people that I was hanging with, they were, it was a time of the different Muslim organizations and things like that. So I began to run in those circles.
But was it the attraction of Islam, or was it the Louis Farrakhan type of approach, which appeals to a lot of black men?
In actuality, I was never a part of the nation. I was a Sunni Muslim. It was the thinking part. Again, I tell you, I was a nerd. So most Muslims that I ran across were highly intelligent people.
This is